after this hangout is over, you can go to YouTube and you can go to this Benjamin Franklin Science Corner Facebook page, and you guys can see each other and can actually can rehear everything again. I think this is a good activity for you to have, because in case you didn't catch some words, then you're gonna be able to catch some words, and then you're gonna be able to hear my lovely accent. Okay. And we are live right now. So I'm also going to go ahead and introduce Mr. Todd Evans. He is the Public Affairs Officer from the U.S. Embassy, and he's going to be giving us a little talk about...
Just a short introduction.
Short introduction about what we're doing tonight. And then for everybody, this is Dr. Idris Stovall. He is from the Franklin Institute, and he is in charge of the STEM and youth programs at the Franklin Institute. And right now, the Benjamin Franklin Science Corner is trying to build a relationship with the Franklin Institute. So I have some brochures here in case you guys want to take it and find out more what about the Science Corner is about. And I also have the living representation of what the Science Corner is about. And it's these guys over here that are all volunteers, that all are from the Science Club, and basically they can talk to you about what the Science Corner is about, what we do at the Science Corner, and they speak English and Spanish. So, in case you want to go ahead. So, Mr. Clark, just...
Great, okay. Well, thanks, Claudia. First of all, thanks everybody for coming. Dr. Stovall, thank you for being here. On behalf of the U.S. Embassy, it's a pleasure to see you. As you know, or you may know, February is Black History Month in the United States. February is a month when we recognize the amazing contributions that African Americans have made to American culture, American sciences, into our national identity. And so today we are able to combine Black History Month with our ongoing relationship with the Ben Franklin Institute, the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, that is working with our Science Corner, our Ben Franklin Science Corner here, to promote youth education in the sciences, math, engineering, science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM. And so it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Idris Stovall. Idris Stovall is the Director of Youth Programs and School Outreach, as Claudia said, at the Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, and his specialty is science and technology and engineering and math education, but specifically STEM, looking at it as a mathematician. He's a computational mathematician. And I think what he's going to tell you a little bit is that mathematics is very important, whether you're doing science, technology, engineering, or math, obviously. But also, he's going to offer us a unique perspective on African American scientists and mathematicians and that part of American history. So today is a day when we get to combine these two very interesting areas of American academics, of Black history, and also science and technology, engineering and math, and specifically mathematics. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Idris Stovall to the program. Idris, do you want to start with remarks first, and then we'll get into questions and answers, or how would you like to begin?
Why don't I go ahead and first off say thank you for such a kind introduction. Second off, you guys are quite a good-looking bunch. I'm glad that you all shifted forward so I'm able to see your wonderful faces. So thank you. Please pardon in advance. I had a PowerPoint that had animations on it, but one of the challenges is using Google Hangout. It's not allowing for my animations. So I'm going to walk you through the PowerPoint, but it won't have some of the activity that I was hoping to have, but I still think we'll be able to get a feel for this exchange because I think it's a wonderful exchange. Can everyone hear and understand me?
Yes.
Great. So what I'm going to do is to switch my screen so that that way you can see my PowerPoint. Can you all see my screen now?
No. There it is. Yes.
Ah, sweet. So, as was just mentioned, what I'd like to engage you all today about is African Americans in the mathematical sciences. As Mr. Tuck just mentioned, I direct youth programs at the Franklin Institute, and by training, I'm a computational mathematician. I also hold a position at the University of Pennsylvania, which is a prestigious institution here in the Philadelphia area, and I've been there for over 10 plus years. In terms of what I'd like to talk with you all today, and again, this would be animated, but I'm just going to talk through it. Can you all see the outline?
Yes.
Great.
Idris, could you maximize the screen? It'll show up bigger. We'll get more of the text. So that it's running as a slideshow?
I think that's
Maybe that's all that we can do.
Yeah, that's the most that I could do at this point, unfortunately.
Okay, okay.
But hopefully it's hopefully the big text is legible, and I'll talk slow so that way. Don't worry so much about the small text. In terms of what I'd like to engage you all today with is an introduction. Who am I? And I'd like to talk a bit about what the mathematical sciences are. From there, I'd like to bridge into African American history in the mathematical sciences. I'd like to start talking about Philadelphia, and then I'd like to use historically black colleges and universities as a big component of what I'd like to discuss with you all today, because there's a lot of African American history, particularly in STEM, that happens through the historically black colleges and universities here in the United States. An acronym is HBCU, Historically Black Colleges and Universities. That's from a historical perspective. I'd then like to bridge into modern day networking amongst African Americans in the mathematical sciences. I'm a participant in a network of African Americans in the mathematical sciences across the country. And we get together every year, and it's called the Conference for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences, also pronounced as CARMS, C-A-A-R-M-S. There's another organization as well, which is called the National Association of Mathematics, NAM. I'll speak a bit about that as well. And it's great to know that this broadcast is happening through YouTube, because I'd also like to share some resources with you, some web pages, so that way if you want to learn more, you can always go and find some of these resources online, and I'll make sure that you have links, so that way if you want to investigate further, you'll have resources to do so. And then the last thing I'd like to do is leave the floor open for question and answer, or Q&A. Does everyone have a sense of where I'd like to go as far as the engagement is concerned today?
Yes.
Great. Let's see here. So, as just was mentioned, my name is Idris Stovall. I direct STEM youth and school programs. I have a bachelor's degree from Hampton University, which is one of those historically black colleges and universities. I'll talk a bit more about that later on. I got my PhD from the University of Massachusetts. Actually, I have a distinction of being the first African American to get a PhD in mathematics from the University of Massachusetts. From there, I went to the University of Pennsylvania, as I mentioned earlier. I have a faculty appointment there. So that gives a bit of a sense of who I am, and I direct youth programs at the Franklin Institute. This is one of those slides that I wished was animated, but I'm going to try my best to go ahead and talk through it in a way that hopefully will give you a sense and a framework for a way to walk into the mathematical sciences. So you'll see at the bottom the smallest red dot. It has data inside of it. From data, there's a larger circle that has information. From information, there's a larger circle that has knowledge inside of it. It's colored green. Are you all able to see?
Yes.
And then there's a largest circle, and it has wisdom inside of it. So the way that you can think through this slide is if you take data, and to the left of that you have organize, and you organize it, you get information. From information, if you understand it, you get knowledge. From knowledge, if you apply it, you get wisdom. That's the left side of the PowerPoint screen. On the right side of the PowerPoint screen, data tells you what is happening. Information tells you what happened. Knowledge tells you what happens, and wisdom gives you what may happen. So I think that and hope that this is a good way to kind of stimulate the conversation and my engagement with you from the lens of introducing what the mathematical sciences are. This one also would be animated, but the way that you can think about this slide is on the bottom left side, there's knowledge. On the top right side is the unknown. Knowledge, you learn. For the unknown, that's research. Teaching is a bridge between learning and research, which will also bridge knowledge to the unknown. Yeesh, this one would be animated as well, but we talked a bit about STEM. STEM is an acronym. The S stands for science, the T for technology, E for engineering, and M for mathematics. So what I'd like to do is talk about mathematics as a tool for organizing and interpreting information. Is my pacing okay? Is everyone following? Great. I'm going to skip this slide. Well, actually, I won't. Mathematics is in general four-dimensional. There's basically four components to it. There's a communication piece to it, the top left piece. There's a computational piece to it, the top right piece. To be able to do the third part, which is the bottom left corner, models and decisions. And of course, underneath of mathematics, the one that most people understand, and when they think of mathematics, they think about the theoretical piece or the theory behind mathematics, the bottom right piece. Oh boy. So, if we were to start at the top of this slide, and pardon it being busy, again, if this was animated, it wouldn't be all at you at one time. But the top part is mathematics. You see the little cone that has mathematics written inside of it? And to connect to the previous slide, if we take information patterns and we funnel it through mathematics, that's pure mathematics. And then there becomes the sciences. Those are natural systems. Are you able to see my cursor sliding around the screen?
Yeah.
Great. So that way, if you couple mathematics with the sciences and funnel it through, you get what's called applied mathematics. Which brings us to the third part, the third funnel, which is engineering. Engineering are man-made systems. If we take the mathematics coupled with the sciences and we bring them through man-made systems through this engineering funnel, we have what's called operations research. There's no way in the world I'm going to go through this slide. Man, I really wish that, again, we had PowerPoint ability, because I think that this would give you a sense of the full breadth of mathematical sciences, but this is way too busy, so I'm going to skip it. And bridge into, hey, this is great. Speaking of technology, it's quite amazing to be able to talk to you. I'm up here in Philadelphia, in the States, and you guys are down there in Asunción, Paraguay. Technology gives us a bridge to be able to talk back and forth. But what I'd like to do is to talk a bit about the mathematical sciences here in Philadelphia. Usually when people think about Philadelphia, do you all know what these are?
No. Those are
What is this? Rocky, right? You know what that is?
no, but that's what it is.
That is the living proof that God exists. That's a cheesesteak.
And Philadelphia, that's not just any cheesesteak. These are Philadelphia cheesesteaks. They're known across the country. And when people think of Philadelphia, one of the things that they think about is Philadelphia cheesesteaks. It's also known as the city of brotherly love. There's a lot of history here in Philadelphia. Here's a schematic or picture that has the Liberty Bell that speaks to a lot of American history. Here's our skyline. This gentleman here, his name is Benjamin Franklin. Are you guys familiar at all with Benjamin Franklin? He's the guy in your science engagements. Perhaps you're familiar. The one who flew the kite in the rain and discovered electricity. Benjamin Franklin. He's one of the scientists that did that. He was a pretty amazing citizen here in Philadelphia as well. And there's lots of institutions in the Philadelphia area that are named after him. I'll talk a bit more about that in a second. Philadelphia was also the United States' first capital when it gained its independence from Great Britain. Now the capital is in Washington, D.C., but the original capital in the United States started in Philadelphia. This guy down here, are you all familiar at all with this gentleman?
Yes.
Rocky Balboa. The funny thing about it is, he's just a character in a movie. So he's not real. But when people think about Philadelphia, or when they think of the movie Rocky, this statue is actually here in Philadelphia. So again, there's lots of history and different aspects of the city of Philadelphia that I think was useful and appropriate in terms of engaging you all to talk a bit about math and science, and it gives me the ability to be able to talk about where I'm from and some of the mathematics and the mathematical sciences that have happened here. which brings me to the Franklin Institute. Franklin Institute is where I work. It is a science center. It's been around for over 100 years. There's lots of math and science, or STEM more broadly, that happen here at the Franklin Institute. Our mission is to inspire a passion for learning about science and technology. We're one of the most visited cultural attractions in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Not only in Pennsylvania, it gives us the great ability to be able to correspond with you all and to work with Miss Claudia and to work with Miss Christina and to work with Mr. Tucker, Mr. Tuck, excuse me, in terms of this kind of engagement. I mentioned earlier about Benjamin Franklin. Of course, the Franklin Institute is named after Benjamin Franklin. But one of the other hats that I wear, which is at the University of Pennsylvania, he was one of the founders of that university as well. So his footprint is throughout the city of Philadelphia. Penn is only one university here. There are several others in the Philadelphia area as well. There's actually over 90 colleges and universities in the Philadelphia area. And this just gives a sampling of the amount of colleges and universities that are here. There's Penn, there's Drexel University, there's Temple University. These are our researching universities. We have others as well. Philadelphia University, St. Joseph's, LaSalle University. There's the University of the Sciences. This slide would get very, very busy if I tried to put 90 plus colleges and universities, but I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the universities and the educational scene here in Philadelphia. But I want to create a bridge. So while I've been talking about universities in the Philadelphia area, there's another group of schools that are called historically black colleges and universities. Hopefully you remember in my original outline, I talked about the HBCUs, historically black colleges and universities. I actually graduated from Hampton University, which is in Virginia. Howard University, which was started in 1867, started in Washington, D.C., so it's in our capital. There's over 106 historically black colleges and universities. I wanted to give you a sense of some of the other ones, like Morehouse, which is an all-male college. It's in Atlanta, Georgia. We have Spelman College, which is an all-ladies HBCU, which is also in Atlanta. They're actually right across the city from each other, Spelman and Morehouse. In Florida, there's Florida Agricultural and Mechanical University, also known as FAMU, F-A-M-U, Florida Agricultural Mechanical University. And then there's Tuskegee University, which perhaps you may have seen the movie Tuskegee Airmen. There was a lot of African-American history, and these Tuskegee Airmen came from and were trained at Tuskegee University, which is also in some of the southern states here in the United States. So what I'd like to do is to build a bridge between one particular HBCU, Howard University, and the University of Pennsylvania, to give a sense of some of the accomplishments of African Americans in the mathematical sciences here in Philadelphia. So, this gentleman here, his name is Robert Klein. He was alive in 1891 through 1955. He was arguably the most influential mathematician in Philadelphia from 1920 to 1950. He should be much better known for among other things, his support of African Americans at a time when such encouragement was not the norm. America has a sordid history. It's one of those bittersweet type histories. On one side, there's lots of opportunity and great accomplishments that have happened here in America. At the same time, so that's the sweet side. At the same time, on the bitter side, there is a legacy of slavery, and African Americans have been had a tough time, I'll put it that way, here in America, historically speaking. And while there has been some accomplishments, and there's been some great accomplishments that I'd like to share with you all, the context and the historical landscape, isn't always the best story in the world to tell. But since it is Black History Month, we want to talk about some of that history and particularly highlight something that happened here in Philadelphia around these three gentlemen. The top one, his name is Dudley Weldon Woodard. He was the second African American to get a PhD here in mathematics in the United States. The second gentleman, his name is William Sheffler Claytor. And then the third one, this guy here, his name is George Butcher. Now, the reason why I put all of them on this exact same slide is that there was a pipeline, a connection, a community that was created between these African American mathematical scientists. And by the way, they all came through Howard University, one of the HBCUs, and they got their PhDs from this guy, John Klein, at the University of Pennsylvania. You may have noticed that I mentioned that Dudley Woodard, he was the second African American to get a PhD in mathematics. The first, his name is Elbert Frank Cox. He got his PhD in mathematics in 1927, which was, I think, only a few months right before Woodard got his. So they were really contemporaries. And Elbert Cox also was a faculty member at Howard University. So Philadelphia has a lot of rich history in terms of African Americans that were connected to an HBCU that had ties and got their PhDs from the University of Pennsylvania through Robert Klein. How we doing? Are you guys okay? Are we following?
Yeah.
Great, great. So I'm going to move through this relatively quickly. But I just wanted to have the picture up, and you can read along. And if you want to talk in the question and answers session a bit more about the particulars, about their dissertation, their advisor, and their area of expertise, we could talk about that during the question and answers. But as I mentioned in the last slide, here's one picture of John Klein. Here's another picture of the same guy. I'm just going to go through them systematically. And as I mentioned, he was the thesis advisor for Woodard, Claytor, and Butcher. And then there was Dudley Weldon. He was born in 1881 and passed away in 1965. Woodard did some pretty amazing things prior to coming to Penn. He had been a member of the faculty for 7 years at Tuskegee Institution in Alabama. He spent 6 years at Wilberforce University in Ohio. He went to Howard University in 1920, which was then the most prestigious African-American university in the country. Now, I should back up for a moment. I was mentioning earlier about some of the bittersweet history of the United States. and I spoke a bit to some of the universities that were here in Philadelphia, and then I made a connection to some of the HBCUs. And a big part of the reason why the HBCUs exist is because earlier in the 20th century and the 19th century, it wasn't acceptable to educate African Americans. So as the United States or America, has its origin and became its own country, and as it became seen that slavery was not a good institution, and that the United States started to distance itself away from the institution of slavery, there was a huge need for these HBCUs to go ahead and educate some of the newly freed slaves that had been fundamental in building up the United States of America, free labor. But once we were freed, African Americans, we needed a way to educate ourselves. And that's where and why these HBCUs are so important. And Dudley Woodard was one of the pioneering African Americans that worked at multiple HBCUs. I mentioned Tuskegee. I mentioned Howard. And he was the first to work with Robert Klein to start the process of creating a pipeline of additional African Americans who were at Howard that worked with Dudley Woodard to get their PhDs. That brings me to William Claytor. William Claytor started at Howard University underneath of Dudley Woodard. And given the ties that Woodard had to Robert Klein, to John Klein, he sent Claytor to Klein to get his PhD. And he actually became the third African American to get his PhD in mathematics here in America. He was born in 1908. He passed away in 1967. His area of expertise was topology, which is a branch of mathematics. Again, if you were interested to learn more about that, I'd be happy to talk more about what topology is during the question and answers, session. And as a relevant aside, one of the things after William Claytor got his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania, he went to get jobs at a different university, University of Michigan. And they didn't offer him tenure simply because he was African American. So while slavery ended, there still was racism and still is racism, here in America. While it has gotten significantly better, it still shows itself historically in terms of this amazing African American mathematical scientist not being able to capitalize on his talents in a university setting due to some of the racist practices at the time. Which brings me to the fourth African American to get a PhD. His name is George Butcher. So he too was one of Dudley Weldon Woodard's students at Howard University that he sent to John Klein to get his PhD. And this other gentleman inside of the picture, his name is, oh goodness, John Robertson. He actually was the department chair for mathematics at Howard University, and I think he just retired, maybe about 5 years ago. So it's interesting to see the bridge between Howard University in its past and Howard University in its future. Even though he's no longer the department chairperson for mathematics at Howard University, I thought that this was a great picture to go ahead and bridge the generations in terms of African American researchers in the mathematical sciences at Howard University. John Klein, here's a picture of him at an older age. He was a big proponent for graduate students and knew that, hey, if you're going to get some more students into the mathematical sciences, particularly at the PhD level, that you have to have strong graduate programming at schools, at universities. So Klein did some pretty amazing things with regards to African Americans getting PhDs in the mathematical sciences here in Philadelphia. One of the things that I think is a good resource for you all, because I know that it was useful for me, was the Math Genealogy Project. And there's actually a website that goes along with this. And I'd like to use this as a bridge to talk from not just the historical aspect of African Americans in the mathematical sciences as it pertains to Philadelphia, but now I'd like to bridge to modern day topic and networking and community for the African American researchers in the mathematical sciences. And you'll notice on here that I have the Conference for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences, which is CARMS. That's been a network that I've been a part of during my whole graduate career, getting my PhD in mathematics. But before I make the full leap into the Conference for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences, let me show you how I use the Math Genealogy Project. You'll notice up here, John Klein. And the boxes that are in red, those are all African Americans. Dudley Woodard, William Plater, and George Butcher, I just talked about them. But there was another student of John Klein, Don Alexander Flanders. And if you follow his students, Jacob Wolfowitz, Albert Bowker, and it continues on down to Otis Jennings, 2000. And Otis Jennings, here's a picture of him. And Andrea Watkins, she's his student. Here's a picture of her. That through the Math Genealogy Project, I'm able to make connections between the historical aspects of African Americans in the mathematical sciences underneath of John Klein to modern times African Americans in the mathematical sciences. Which brings me to the Conference for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences. The founder for CARMS, and I'm going to say CARMS for short because it tongue-ties me to say Conferences for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences. Are you all okay with me saying CARMS for short? C-A-A-R-M-S?
Yes.
Great. It's been around for 20 years. We get together every year, and it's been spearheaded by a colleague of mine. His name is William Massey. He's at Princeton University, which is in New Jersey, and he's in their Operations Research and Financial Engineering Department. Notice, it doesn't say mathematics, and it's more along the lines of the mathematical sciences, because mathematics is a language for STEM in general, or science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and it shows itself in an array of different fields, of which operations research and financial engineering are one, or a couple at least. CARMS, let me back up slightly. Let's talk about the total number of U.S. awarded PhDs in the mathematical sciences in 2011 and 2012. This is one of those slides that would be animated, but again, since we're having a technical glitch that I can't do the animation, pardon this information being all at you at one time. The point behind this slide is that in 2011-2012, there were 1,798 PhDs that were granted in the United States. 1,244 of them were male. 554 of them were female. We took the data and we split it up even further. 242 of those lady females were born in the United States. 312 of them were not, thus the non-USAPs. Of the 1,244 males, 621 of them were born here in the United States. 623 of them were born outside of the United States. But we wanted to get even more refined in terms of the amount of information that we can gather in terms of the data that we got from the AMS, which is American Mathematical Society, on those which are African Americans, those that are Latino, those that are Asian, and those who are Native American here in the States. Let's talk a bit about the total number of U.S. awarded black PhDs. Black is another way of saying African American, by the way, in the mathematical sciences for the 21st century, from 2000 to 2012. And the numbers haven't gotten much better over the past 3 years, even though there has been some progress. But this will give you a sense of how many total there are that's happened in the 21st century. There's 446 out of, I think, 446, which is only 2.8% of all the PhDs that were given in the 21st century. If we restrict that to be just with regards to native-born African Americans, that's 3% of all the PhDs, that were given in the United States. 446 total from 2000 to 2012. If we break this apart, 314 of them are males. 132 of them are females, African Americans. And then we took it a step further. Well, hold up. Before I do that, you'll see that there's a discrepancy between the amount of males and the amount of females. And it's not because females are any different or any less capable of doing mathematics. There's all types of systemic problems that I think dissuade our ladies from pursuing advanced degrees. It has nothing at all to do with their aptitude or capability. It's more of a systemic problem that we need to address as well. So while there's African American prejudice, there's also prejudice against ladies as well when it comes to the mathematical sciences or STEM more broadly speaking. And that's the reason why I wanted to break these numbers apart. Only 132 females and compared to 314 males relative to this 446 that were granted from 2000 to 2012 in terms of black PhDs in the 21st century. We can take it a step further, in terms of those that are non-USA born versus those that are USA born, United States of America born. And the same thing with males, 190 that were not from the United States, born in the United States, compared to 124 that actually were born in the United States. Same thing. Of the USA black PhDs, 46% of them were males. Again, just to give you a sense of the numbers of African Americans who have gotten PhDs in the mathematical sciences. CARMS, back up. CARMS, the Conference for African American Researchers in the Mathematical Sciences. I mentioned that we have had 20 conferences over the past 20 years. Here are all the different places that there has been conferences. It started in the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute, which is in California. It's gone through Bell Labs, which is in New Jersey. It's been at Morgan State, which is in Maryland. It's gone through Rice University, which is in Texas. It's gone to the University of Michigan, which is, of course, in Michigan. I'm not going to go through all of this whole list. Let's see if I go back up. I'm not going to go through this whole list. The point is that there's a whole network of African Americans that come together at this conference that's national. You know, we're all over the country. And oftentimes this story is not told, and people say, hey, there aren't a lot of African Americans in the mathematical sciences. Well, there actually is a significant amount of us, and we're networked nationally, which is pretty impressive, given that story doesn't really get told, which is great for me to be able to give you some insight to the network and community of African American researchers in the mathematical sciences here in the United States during Black History Month. This gives you the first CARMS and the 19th CARMS. It might be hard for you to see. I'm this guy right here, sitting in the front. You know, in 1995, I have a few more gray hairs. I've gained a little bit of weight since. I actually still have my shirt from that CARMS. I can still fit my shirt. So that's good to know. But yes, you know, that's a picture of me in 1995 as part of this community of African American researchers in the mathematical sciences. Here it is in 2013. That's me right there. So it's been extremely instrumental in terms of having a network of people who look like me to come together annually once a year to talk about how we're doing in some of the things that we're doing in terms of the mathematical sciences. We have a healthy community, the point. We've had over 100 poster presenters that have gone on to get PhDs in the mathematical sciences over the 20 years of CARMS. There has been 35 attendees who have actually gone on to become tenured academic professors at universities across the country. Lots of pictures. It's a great community to be a part of. Uh-oh, sorry. Technical glitch there. Back up one. There we go. If you wanted to learn more, this was one of those websites that I wanted to give you. Here's a website to be able to see and learn more about CARMS, if you're so interested. But then there's also another website called the Mathematicians of the African Diaspora, MAD. And I'd like to read this because I think that it's useful. In mathematics, more than any other field of study, have we heard proclamations and statements similar to, the Negro is incapable of succeeding. However, ancient and present achievements contradict such statements. One of the purposes of this website is to exhibit the inaccuracy of those proclamations by exhibiting the accomplishments of the peoples of Africa and the African diaspora within the mathematical sciences, which is the end of my PowerPoint slide. So let me go all the way back to the beginning. So you'll see that I covered, you know, through an introduction, some African American history with regards to the mathematical sciences in Philadelphia that gives ties to historically black colleges and universities. I've talked a bit about the story of John Klein, the 3 African American researchers that have come, the second, third, and fourth PhD level black mathematicians that came out of Philadelphia. I talked a bit about modern day networking amongst African Americans in the mathematical sciences, and particularly the CARMS network. And I have a few resources as well. Let me show you a website. Uh-oh. I may have to reshare my screen. If I do this, bear with me. Screen share. And I want to start screen share. So I think it popped up that, let's see if I do this. Can you all see the Mathematicians of the African Diaspora website?
Yeah.
Here is the quote that I just read to you all. But it's a great website. I'll make sure that I pass along links so that way if you want to click on it, you can go ahead and explore that website. It gives a lot of information about African Americans, and let's see, there's got to be a way to do this. Let's see if I do this. Window that way. And if you enter into it, do you all see that?
Yeah.
There's a wealth of information if you want to learn more about African Americans and more broadly, African diaspora, which is people from all over the world that are of African descent that have gone on to do mathematics. Great resource for you all. A separate website. Here, I'm going to try to juggle this Google Hangout again. I'll stop screen sharing, and I'm going to go to the NAM website. NAM stands for the National Association of Mathematicians. Notice, lots of African Americans. And NAM is about promoting excellence in the mathematical sciences and promoting the mathematical development of underrepresented American minorities, of which African Americans is one subgroup. There's also Latino and Latina, Hispanics, are also part of the underrepresented minorities, here in America that could benefit from being a part of NAM, the National Association of Mathematicians, as well as the CARMS network. And here is one last one. Stop. Screen share. CARMS. That guy. Let's see here. CARMS, where is it at? Oops, that's the one right there. That guy. You can also find out more about the CARMS network by going to this website as well. So I think that that's a good place for me to stop. Hopefully, some of this information has been useful to you all. I should probably open up to questions and answers at this point. So let me switch back so that way I can see you all and you can see me. And if you have questions, I'd love to answer any questions that you may have. Stop. And I'm back. Greetings. So, I don't know if you have any questions.
We have a question over here. You can come in here, or you can just say it from where you're at.
Hello, Dr. Stovall.
Yes, hello.
It's nice to have you tonight with us.
Thank you.
It was a pretty interesting conference, and I have to say that I learned a lot of things, a lot of new things from Philadelphia that I didn't know.
Great.
I have a question about, you talk about that there are a lot of universities and institutes in Philadelphia,
yes,
that support African American people. But what about universities in other states? In other universities, they have the same acceptance to African American, or is different?
Well, let's see here. While Philadelphia has a high concentration of colleges and universities, in terms of the pipeline or creating more African Americans in the mathematical sciences, you'll notice that I only pointed to Penn, University of Pennsylvania. I'm sorry, University of Pennsylvania. Um, there weren't historically a lot of universities in Philadelphia that supported African Americans, which was part of why what University of Pennsylvania did, and particularly John Klein, in terms of supporting those talented African Americans who were interested in pursuing the mathematical sciences, that there was a means for them to achieve at the PhD level. So University of Pennsylvania was one of the exceptions to the rule, historically speaking. That carries over not just to Philadelphia, that carries over nationally. That's the reason why it was so important to have these historically black colleges and universities to be able to support those African Americans who wanted to pursue advanced studies in general. And in STEM, there's a subset of those students who go through historically colleges and black colleges and universities, excuse me, for advanced studies in STEM areas. So while Philadelphia and Penn, University of Pennsylvania, was instrumental historically, it wasn't the norm, and nor is it the norm these days in the United States to have very supportive environments for African Americans. So while there's been some progress made, there still is a lot of ground to cover. And hopefully the numbers that I was sharing with you from the total number of PhDs in the mathematical sciences from 2000 to 2012, we're still only talking out of that total number, 3% are African Americans getting PhDs in the mathematical sciences. So again, while there's progress, there's still a lot of room and room for more progress. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Stovall. That was very interesting, and I hope that someday there will be no more differences. All universities accept everything, and I hope that I give you my wishes, and we support here. So wherever you want to come here, so this is your home. Thank you.
I really appreciate it, and hopefully you get a chance to come to Philadelphia. I'd love to have. Well, you look good on film, man. I'd love to see you in person.
Okay, thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Are there any more other questions? Okay, Dr. Stovall, I have a question from. You come in, so I talk about you a lot, so he knows you already. He just hasn't seen you.
Hello, doctor. I was very surprised and amazed by what was your speech about and what you have explained to us. And I want to introduce me. I am a physics and mathematics Olympiad student, and I take part in Olympiads. They are national and international, and that gave me the chance to visit UC San Diego, and I saw you have a photo there, and I have a question. I want to know that if you how can you be able to get a PhD? I mean, it is so difficult. Like for a person like me, right? Like I am from Latin America, right? And we don't have like the best education like around the world. We are not like very known for having the best education here in Paraguay. And I want to know if there is a chance for Latin Americans to improve their self. Like if we can practice a lot, and if that is the only thing we need to have in order to get a PhD like you had like.
Great question, and a couple of things. one, notice you and I are talking through the internet right now. And it's nice to be able to see you electronically, and hopefully at some point, we'll be able to meet in person, from a mathematical scientist to a mathematical scientist. You'll notice in my talk the importance of networking. It is super important to go ahead and stay connected to your community, and to our community. I'm not going to, make the distinction between, African American or, Hispanic. We're, all brothers and sisters, with regards to the craft of mathematical sciences and STEM more broadly. What was really important for me while I was going through the PhD process was coming together at the CARMS conference every year, so that way I could literally have a moment to just be amongst people who look like me, who are going through some of the same challenges, and to give a sense that, hey, I'm not alone, and that there are others who are wrestling in the same way that I am, so that way I don't feel as if I'm going crazy, when I'm in the solitary process of getting a PhD. I should mention that in the CARMS network, there was a connection to the Latino community here in the United States as well, through Richard Tapia. Richard Tapia is an amazing, awesome pioneer, Hispanic, in the mathematical sciences. Blackwell is an African American, pioneer in the mathematical sciences. In their honor, there was the Blackwell Tapia Conference. It has its ties to CARMS, but it also ties together the African American community to the Latino community here in the United States around the mathematical sciences. And they too have their own network, and we have a broader network, in terms of connecting us together. And now through this medium, in terms of technology and being able to talk through the internet, we have an even broader, community. So hopefully, we can do more of these Google Hangouts, and as you're going through the process of going from, to go after our PhD, if that's something that you're interested in doing, that, hey, know that I'm here. And there's a whole network of us, that would love to support, you and your colleagues while you're going through the process, because it's, there's strength in numbers, and there really is an importance of community that is helpful for persevering through PhD studies.
Well, that is something.
Your question, and as a matter of fact, Ms. Claudia, if you wouldn't mind, feel free to share my information, my contact information, with your students and any of your colleagues, down there, because I love talking the mathematical sciences, comparing notes, and being a resource and a support to students who are interested in achieving more in the mathematical sciences. So please feel free to use my contact information to stay in touch.
Okay, I will do so.
Thank you a lot, Doctor. It's a pleasure.
Yes, likewise.
Are there any more questions for Dr. Idris? I have a question for you.
Sure.
And this is me. Okay. So, why did you want to study math out of all the things you could have done? Why math?
Gotcha. Great question. My father is a carpenter.
Excuse me?
My
Your
father, he's a carpenter. And
Okay.
one of the things that he used to do when I was a little boy, is he would carry me on his carpentry jobs, and he made sure that I had my math skills handy when he was out there on his jobs. I used to fight. I did not like times tables. Oh my gosh, I used to fight him tooth and nail about, me having to have my math skills handy when he was on his carpentry jobs. But one of the things that I realized is that when I was in school, I was always a few steps ahead of some of my classmates, because of what my father did. And what that ultimately gave me was an opportunity to get positive reinforcement from my teachers around my mathematical skills. And I enjoyed that. And it made me want to continue on. And sure enough, I continued on so far that, that I've got my doctorate in it now. Funny story. I have a young nephew who he's not young anymore. He's about he's about 25. But when I was still in school, getting my PhD in mathematics, he asked me a question. He said, "Hey, Uncle, what grade are you in?" And I actually had to count up the number of years that I was in school, and I was in the 27th grade at that time, because I had gone through elementary studies here in the United States, high school, undergraduate education, got a master's degree, and then ultimately a PhD. So I think I was pretty close to finishing, being in the 27th grade at that point. But it was quite a ride, and it's led me to some great opportunities, such as working at the Franklin Institute and now being able to engage you all. But that's the backstory in terms of why I chose mathematics.
Okay, thank you so much.
No problem.
Any more questions or comments? I just want to comment on this. Everybody at the Franklin Institute, they have a very, very interesting life, and that's why I wanted to ask this question. I was dying to know.
Dr. Stovall, can I ask one follow-up question just for our team here?
Sure.
Many of the audience here are young mathematicians, young scientists, people who are interested in the sciences. I was wondering if you could recommend either the Franklin Institute, of course, but other sites, other resources for young people who are interested in the sciences and maybe want to connect either with the United States or other scientific communities or organizations, so that you can. I mean, part of this adventure of being a scientist is the community and finding new resources and finding other people that are interested in the same things you are, so that you can get beyond where you are physically and enjoy a broader community. So I was wondering if I could ask you for some recommendations for that.
Sure. Well, definitely the websites that I mentioned earlier, and I can aggregate them into an email and send it off to you, so that way you can share it amongst the students who are interested, your students who are interested in mathematics and science. There's strength in numbers in terms of creating community and studying together and working hard together and being about excellence with regards to your craft. That's super important. So those websites I'll make sure that I send along to you for CARMS. For the Richard Tapia, the Blackwell Tapia conference, because that one also has connections to the Hispanic community, through the mathematicians of the African diaspora. Of course, the Franklin Institute website. There's lots of resources that are there as part of the Franklin Institute as a science center. I should probably mention that what Franklin Institute does as a science center is informal science or informal education. It's a little bit different than what you get in your formal education here in the United States. Formal education is more along the lines of your standard schools. They have standard classrooms in them. You and I were talking a bit about standardized testing earlier. There's heavy tests that are given in a formal setting. Oftentimes, you don't get a chance to get to some of the applications, when you're in a formal education. It's more on your skills, not necessarily giving you the ability to be able to transfer those skills into some real-world context, which is what the beauty of being in an informal science center, an informal education setting is. It does allow the connections to be made between the math and science skills that you learn in school as part of an educational system into real-world context. That way your skills become relevant. So the Franklin Institute has lots of resources online as well to go ahead and maybe give some deeper insight, to your students who might be trying to figure out, well, hey, where are all these skills useful and used at? In an informal, setting, and some of the resources through the Franklin Institute might be helpful along those lines as well, Tuck.
Okay, thank you.
No problem.
Thank you. So with this, I want to close this hangout. I want to thank everybody for participating today. We had a very nice conversation going on. Thank you for asking more questions. I will stick around. I know your class finished at 8:50 and it's 8:24, so I will stick around in case anybody has more questions. Also, just so you know, this will be broadcasted on YouTube, and I will also put a link on it on Facebook, and it also goes to my Twitter page of the Benjamin Franklin Science Corner, and I'm pretty sure the embassy will do the same. We can put another, we can post the link there too, and it will also be on the Google Plus link. So anyone has access, and I will stay around, and if you guys have more questions, I'm very happy to answer more questions. And once again, thank you, Dr. Idris, for participating. It's always very nice seeing you, so we are probably going to be doing more of this if you have time, of course. So thank you so much for participating.
My pleasure, and I look forward to future engagements with you all as needed. And by the way, for everyone who asks questions, your English is great. So if you want to talk about English too, or have a means to practice English in the context of math, science, engineering, and science, feel free to reach at me for that as well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.